Bees, eh, Jack? Here's your wrestling news. A top superstar suffers an injury on Monday Night Raw. This week's episode of Raw also affected by another COVID outbreak. And AEW are planning to resume touring soon. We'll talk about that in a bit. Monday Night Raw has been a weird one since WrestleMania came and went, and we've got an idea as to why, which we'll get to in just a moment, but potentially a top star from the show could be out of action. What's the story, Jack?
Yeah, Randy Orton was apparently injured on Raw, but we don't quite know the extent of it yet. Dave Meltzer was saying on Wrestling Observer Radio late on yesterday. I don't know the extent of what happened, but Randy Orton hurt his shoulder. He was fighting out of the corner, and Riddle went to give him an exploder, but Randy didn't take an exploder. He blocked it and pulled back and did this very dramatic punch, and he punched him, and from that point forward, could no longer use his right arm. He was throwing forearms with his left. It was like that one day when he punched the mat and his shoulder went out. So if you remember that previous Orton injury, I think he was psyching up for an RKO or something where he hits the mat and he threw his shoulder out. Meltzer's saying it's comparable to that, but we don't actually know the extent of it right now.
He's had shoulder injuries on and off for a long, long time, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think his Orton got hypermobile shoulders or something like that, which helps him in one way because he's very dramatic with his selling and everything. But at the same time, I guess it might come with its risks. It may have nothing to do with that. In fairness, it might just be one of those injuries that just happens out of nowhere in wrestling, reminding us all that even the most innocuous of wrestling matches can feature an injury. It doesn't have to be matches with incredible high spots or anything like that.
More often than not, I feel like some of the big injuries that befall people come from really sort of rudimentary spots and moments, Yeah,
it can happen quite often. Do you remember I think it was Pac or Neville in WWE? I think he slid on the mat or something or came to a stop and then injured himself in that way. It can come from the smallest of moments. It's very strange. But
Sami Zayn is a good one. When he was out to fight John Cena in that US Open challenge, threw his arms up like he does to get the crowd going, pops his shoulder out. Done.
Yeah.
Before the match even started.
It's crazy. Yeah. And in the case of Orton, they've still carried on this social media activity between him and Riddle and making jokes and stuff. Possibly even teasing an alliance, although I don't know how serious that is. But does that perhaps indicate that it's not that serious an injury and he won't be out for too long? I'm not quite certain yet, but we'll keep everybody posted, obviously, if more details emerge.
Yeah, the Orton-Riddle thing was something that kicked off on Raw. We were meant to see Randy Orton versus Braun Strowman. The match was changed, along with many other things, to Monday Night Raw. And the last 2 weeks of Monday Night Raw have been lacking a little something, a little energy. And we mentioned in the last news video how the ratings are down. And I mean, part of the reason why that is that both last Monday and the week before felt very much the same. Turns out there could be a very good reason for that, isn't there, Jack?
Yeah, so obviously last week's Raw was the Raw after WrestleMania, which felt strangely flat to a lot of people compared to other Raws after Manias in previous years. And then this week's Raw as well. On our website, Cultaholic.com, Aidan wrote a little bit about how this week's Raw felt quite similar to last week's Raw. They had similar matches, similar structure, that sort of thing, as if something wasn't quite right. According to the Wrestling Observer, there has apparently been another COVID-19 outbreak within WWE, and that's one of the reasons why both this week's Raw and last week's Raw were so similar, and possibly why they felt so limited as well. But there's no word yet on how many superstars have indeed tested positive or been in contact with somebody who has.
It's awful timing for this, coming out of WrestleMania, and you want to come back and hit the gas on everything and get motoring towards it, and it's just been an awkward 2 weeks of wrestling from Monday Night Raw where you have had that lack of star power and the shows have felt very samey as a result of just sort of keeping things ticking over till presumably a safe point where people can come back. And to those who are affected by COVID, who are off the screen at the moment, we send them obviously the best wishes. Hopefully plans aren't too scuppered for them going forward. Talking of plans for WWE stars, Chris Masters, who has been popping up on NWA Power as of late. Great to see Chris Masters back in the mix on one of my favourite wrestling shows. He was on with Chris Van Vliet on Insight, talking about a few things. Quite a lot of conversation from Chris Masters. He talks a little bit about plans that were scuppered in WWE, that big plans that Vince and co had for him. He says, quote, The one thing you learn about wrestling, you don't count your chickens before they hatch. Before something actually happens, you don't count on it. There was a pre-taped shot with Vince and me where Vince alluded to me being the youngest WWE champion of all time. This was even after Randy had won it. I knew they were considering Cena and me for an angle. I think probably looking back, if anything, I think Cena might have shot that down. I don't think Cena was too happy working with me around that time. I could have good matches with HBK, but I felt Cena thought he had to lead me. It's probably because I was new and stuff like that. It was just a little bit more difficult in-ring chemistry-wise. He goes on to say, I feel like they could potentially reach out again at some point, but I'm kind of at the point where I feel like I've been exiled. We've seen it happen in the past. Like I said, never say never. They could reach out to me for something. I've just kind of taken it off my list of goals at this point. I'm focusing on the NWA and my education. Chris Masters feeling as if he's been exiled from the company, which there's been a few people who have, from that sort of time frame that Chris was there, feel like they had sort of run-ins with the likes of John Cena, and whether or not that interaction didn't go their way led to them sort of falling by the wayside. What do you reckon to this, Jack, when we hear this?
It's definitely interesting, isn't it? I know that I've heard Alex Riley say similar things. Maybe Masters was a little bit more reserved in talking about Cena. He, in fairness, seemed quite... he seemed to be quite taking it all in his stride in this interview with Chris Van Vliet. He was saying, I kind of get why Cena wasn't that looking forward to working with me because, hey, don't forget, not only was I inexperienced, but Cena himself at the same time was also about my level of experience. So he can perhaps understand that. That's why he uses HBK as a counterpoint, saying, well, he's had so much experience, he could work with anybody and it was fine. But I think perhaps when there's a time period where somebody is so popular and bursts onto the scene so fast and is pushed so hard, unfortunately there are probably going to be casualties or people who should have made more of themselves who just couldn't because it was really bad timing for them. How much Cena actively had to do with that and protecting his position, we don't quite know. But Masters also there, I'm surprised, not surprised, but it's interesting to hear him talking about feeling exiled. Because he's right, we have seen a lot of people come back, whereas he's never been reached out to, as far as he's saying. I was very surprised when Carlito came back. Obviously, Master's tag partner off and on again at various points. And then Carlito, before long was out the door again. So I kind of get it, but I feel glad for him that he's got current stuff going on with NWA and everything.
Oh, yeah. 22 days and counting as NWA national champion. And he's a good fit for that brand. Like Chris Adonis. Just looks the part for this old style wrestling show. So yeah, even though we're not seeing him in WWE, I'm intrigued to see what he does with them going forward.
Absolutely, I definitely agree. He's got that old school thing about him, hasn't he? He's the massive heel with the physique. Is he a heel in NWA at the moment?
Oh, actually? Yeah, very much.
Okay,
he did a thing like he's kind of aligned with Strictly Business, Nick Aldis's lads. Yeah. Kind of sort of aligned there, and he's a good fit for it. I can see He's got the look. I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
WWE a big fan of money, and they made a fair bit of it over the other weekend because there was that small little wrestling show that they put on just to test the waters with fans called WrestleMania 37, nights 1 and 2, and we have a little bit of a breakdown of how much of the old Spondulics they made from the show.
Yeah, Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics. And by the way, if you've never checked out WrestleNomics, it's a phenomenal site. Have they just, am I right in saying they've started a Patreon?
Yes, they have indeed. So you can support WrestleNomics. If you want for number crunching your wrestle maths, go and see Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics.
Yeah, they're all, but Brandon Thurston as well, they're all very good at breaking down the business side of wrestling and making it quite accessible, because often you can read things and just be like, what's going on here, whereas they kind of explain it in slightly plainer language a lot of the time. But they revealed that WWE made $6.2 million on tickets from both nights of WrestleMania, and they also talked a little bit about the attendance figures and how they compared with the announced attendance figures, because as we all know, WWE inflate the attendance figures. It's just an accepted thing that happens in wrestling. But the first night apparently was attended by 18,328 people, and the second night slightly higher, 18,924 people. So both approaching the sort of 20,000 limit. But then WWE announced higher attendances for each night. Both nights apparently were attended, according to WWE, by 25,675 people, claiming a sellout on both nights, which is why the number's exactly the same. But WrestleNomics have gone through the Tampa Sports Authority. I'm imagining their numbers are slightly more accurate here.
Maybe. But interesting to see how much money they make. That's going to be a little thing for Vince McMahon to think on when it comes time to plan your journey out of the Thunderdome, to go beyond it once again. I know that WWE, they haven't said it officially, I don't believe, but there is a lot of conversation about WWE looking to get back on the road from SummerSlam onwards, which would be a few more months of Thunderdome-based goodness. But AEW, to finish on today, planning it a little bit earlier. Only a little bit, though, right, Jack?
Yes, JR has been speaking on Grilling JR on his own platform, saying AEW is getting our schedule together. It looks like we're going to be back on the road pretty aggressively beginning in July. Getting back in front of a live audience is a blessing. I can't wait. He goes on to say it will help everybody's work. You can't help but feed off the adrenaline of the people and the audience surrounding you. So yeah, it looks like they're going to maybe pip WWE to live touring once again by about a month or so, it seems.
And I think everybody's champing at the bit to get back in front of live crowds.
Tommaso champing at the bit.
Oh, I see what you did there, because he's from NXT. With AEW, they really have handled it. Like both WWE and AEW have managed to keep on going through it. Obviously with WWE, it's kitting out like a massive multimedia complex. And with AEW, it's leaning on that relationship with the Jacksonville Jaguars and broadcasting from Daly's Place. I've got used to the aesthetic of Daly's Place now.
Yeah,
as a venue for AEW, it'd be weird seeing them anywhere else now.
I was going to say it's almost going to be weird seeing them in other venues. But one strength of AEW before the pandemic, I thought, was occasionally they'd have a show, like their shows would look a little bit more unique. They'd have obviously the cruise ship, but they'd have ones in venues that looked a little bit unusual, and I quite liked that. So hopefully they get back to that again, and hopefully, obviously, it goes without saying, but hopefully both companies can do so safely, and hopefully everything gets more back on track in terms of people being able to attend things in large numbers.
12 months time, AEW at Craven Cottage.
For those who don't know, that's Fulham's football stadium there. So
I wasn't going to tell them. I was going to see if they researched it.
No, show don't tell and all that.
Yeah, show don't grow. But that's for a different podcast. Stays. Talking of Craven Cottage and football.
Go on.
Cultaholic FC.
Cultaholic FC, that's tonight. On Twitch at 6 p.m. Myself and Owen continuing our season with Cultaholic FC. It's going suspiciously well. I'm waiting for it all to come tumbling down, but at the moment it all seems to be going absolutely fine. One problem that we've encountered though is that we're doing really well. It looks like we're going to get promoted, so the players are all coming to us saying, yeah, if you want us to play next year and want us to extend our contract, we're going to want quite a lot more money. So we're like...
Greedy.
Greedy.
A rumour's true that Cultaholic FC look to join the Super League.
No, but we did get actually asked that on Twitter. So yeah.
Maybe next time. Maybe next time somebody money hungry comes in to try and destroy football. Maybe next time. Stay safe. Twitch.tv/Cultaholic. 6 p.m. British summertime. Love you. Bye.